as Sherry was saying, I grew up in the Midwest, and it's quite a different scenario there.
No droughts.
Well, they have droughts. It doesn't rain for 3 weeks, and it's a drought. Seriously. I mean, when I grew up in Chicago, that's how you define a drought. If it doesn't rain for 3 weeks in the summer, everybody freaks out, water tables go down, and oh my gosh, we're having a drought. I move here, we have a 4 to 5 month design drought every year. We live in a very special location on Earth, the Mediterranean climate. We share it with just a few places on the Earth. So this whole, we don't have rain for all of the summer thing is pretty unusual worldwide. So back where I'm from, this may be appropriate, although all this lawn here still takes a lot of chemicals and fertilizer and a lot to keep up, and a lot of water, which they may have back there if it doesn't stop raining for 3 weeks. This is a typical scene in our area, taken just a few days ago. You know, a lot of shrubs, a lot of thirsty plants. You know, I understand the smell of cut grass, the beauty of it. I do understand that. I just don't think it's appropriate here. I think if you really like that, you should probably move back east or to England, where it originated, because it's just not appropriate here, and we're seeing how inappropriate it is when we have droughts. California, you know, like I said, they have a 4 to 5 month. We have a 4 to 5 month design drought, but then we have these other droughts superimposed on that where we hardly get anything, and that's where we are right now. This I call the benign neglect yard. This is somebody who's sort of throwing some water around here and there to water their shrubs, but for the most part, they're just making weeds. These are, you know, dandelions from another continent. Opportunist plants, that's what weeds are. Some of our plants are actually weeds on other continents, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. And then there's the scorched earth look. They're not wasting water, I can tell you that. Not on their landscape anyway. But boy, that's a nice corner house here in the valley. That property value is not hanging up right now. It's just, it looks really bad. Some people's concept, and you know, I'm a fan of succulents and cacti. They're fun, but there's something missing from those around here. And that's something missing. So yeah, you're gonna save some water with this. One thing you have to watch is frost, because a lot of these are frost tender, and we do get some good cold snaps around here. But also, it's kind of devoid of any value for wildlife. You're not gonna see butterflies flittering around in here. You're not gonna see bees, for the most part. You're not gonna see a whole lot of the native insects that you would be missing. Those native insects bring cool birds and lizards and things like that. So something like this, although it may be saving water, I don't know, it doesn't really do it for, especially if you're like a butterfly that's looking for food. It doesn't do it at all. Something like this does. This is a native garden, recently established and just going off, you know, and this is with very little water, very little supplemental water. So this is right in Campbell. And there are actually native turfs as well. I'm not going to go into that too much. Some other programs that will be done later in the year will talk about this. But there are this is a native turf. And it looks for all the world like the grass that everybody wants to have, yet it takes very little water compared to regular lawn. So it's not a bad option if you want to have a little stretch. Now, if you're looking to you know, play sports or you know, play soccer, it's probably not the best. It's kind of lumpy. But you know what? We have parks where we're wasting water. You know, the government wastes water on those parks. So you can go play on those yards. Those lawns are wonderful. And they do have a purpose. So, that doesn't seem to be fitting quite right. But, I think we're all pretty familiar with this scenario right now where there's the whole state's in a drought, everybody here. This is extreme drought here. We're exceptional. Yeah, we're right in the middle of this exceptional drought that it's staggering how bad it is right now, and it has not been seen in recorded history, the kind of drought we're having right now. Also, it pays to mention that climate scientists say, get used to it, California. This is what it's going to be. Now, I don't know if it's always going to be this bad. I think we'll have years where it's better. But a lot of the climate models are saying this is what we can expect, is warmer and drier. So I don't think I need to convince everybody here, but I'm just kind of going over some of the reasons why it's good to think about using natives as opposed to plants from Europe or Eastern North America that a lot of people plant around here. This is a graph that maybe you've seen. Most of what we use in a residential basis is used outdoors for our landscaping. You got all these things, don't flush, let it mellow when it's yellow type of thing. But that's only 11%. Look at that huge chunk of pie that we're using. And that can be cut down radically. So just another brief plug. This is the Hidden Villa Nursery for CNPS, the California Native Plant Society. Santa Clara Valley chapter. You saw that our next sale is October 18th. A lot of what I'm going over today is garnered from experience and helping at these sales. These plant sales, there's native plants available at a lot of locations right now, but the Native Plant Society has one more thing that a lot of the local places don't necessarily have, although Almaden Valley Nursery and several of the Summer Winds do have experts now. But what we have here is just tons of people who are willing to give you advice and help you learn how to use these plants. It's just a little bit of a shift in mind. It's not a radical thing, but it really makes sense when you're thinking about what California has in our scheduled droughts every year, that you'd use plants that grew up here and learn how to do this. So here's some of the questions we'll answer today, and these are some of the frequently asked questions that I get when we're at these sales. Well, that question might be, where's this? Whose yard is this? But no, this is Pinnacles National Monument, because it was 2005, now Pinnacles National Park. This is the east entrance in a good year. So that doesn't really have anything to do with this program, I just like pretty pictures. Should I start, this one I've been hearing a lot lately. Should I start my native garden now or wait till the drought's over? So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. What's the best time of year to plant my garden? Talk about that. And this is a big one, always. How often do I need to water, and what should I do? How do I water? How do I do this? That's the thing that's a little bit different with these plants as opposed to the plants that are conventionally used. I have this nasty hard pan clay soil. Everybody comes in and says that. I think about half of us probably do have it. But we'll talk about soil and how to deal with soil mitigation as well. And then always, which plant will work best on my side yard, my front yard? I have this terrible spot where it's really sunny. What can I plant there? Nothing grows. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about which plants, because that's really the secret of native plant gardening, is choosing the right plants. It's the secret of gardening, period. But if you're looking to save water, you want to choose the right plants. And finally, how do we get these new plants that I just purchased? How do I get them in the ground and get them to succeed? So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So first of all, start now or wait. If you're doing this is a typical sort of downtown San Jose. Small yards, but they are really juicing them up with water. If you're doing this right now, I would say it's time to start right away. The problem is that you're going to use some water in establishing these plants. They are drought tolerant, but they're not completely. When I first moved here, I gotta tell this story. I was all excited about drought tolerant plants, and I planted a manzanita in March, and I watered it a few times, and the thing died, and I was so mad at these drought tolerant plants. How could they do that to me? Well, they're drought tolerant, but take in mind that you're taking it from a 1 gallon container and trying to get it to live outside. Those 1 gallon containers, by the way, are watered just about every day in the nursery. So you have to do it a particular way. And we will talk about that. So start now or wait. If you're doing this, I would still say start now, because you're still wasting a little bit of water on shrubs, and you're throwing water around, maybe not. So that's a native front yard in downtown San Jose. There's another one. These things are taking very little water, very simple designs. They're not terribly complex. There's a few species. Now let's think about this versus this. All sorts of things going on here, buzzing with activity, butterflies, native bees, bumblebees. European honeybee likes it too. What's going on here? Not a whole lot. Over on, actually, I had some handouts on the table. There's a study down in the city of Santa Monica. They actually compared two houses next to each other, similar sized lots. One with a conventional landscape, one with a native landscape. 83% savings in water. So that's that big piece of pie we had, that thing's cut down massively when you use natives. So there are actual, and then the study is very good. It's not just, oh, we did this. They thought about it, and they put controls down to show. So that you can find that on the internet. It's called the Garden. It's two houses right next to each other. Really opened my eyes. Like, wow, I knew we saved water with natives, but not that much. It's incredible. So when to plant, and if you've got plants now and you're ready to plant, can you wait just a little longer? Because especially if you're going to plant into a drought, this is really important. Plant with the season. Not only do we expect rain, we expect it, we may not get it, but we expect rain around that time, but also it cools off. So your plants don't lose as much moisture as they would right now. Right now is the worst time to plant. So a lot of people get the gardening bug around now. Try to hold off if you can. There's a secondary window, and again, if you're planting into a drought, this is not a great option, to be honest. A lot of people get the gardening bug in spring. Our spring sales are always people all enthusiastic. It's rough. You really have to spend quite a bit of water to establish plants when it's getting warmer and warmer every day. So really consider this time of year is the great planting time of year. This time of year is action. When to transplant, so that's different from what time of year. This is about when do I do it. There's a clue of when not to do it. Wouldn't we love to see that now? Avoid big storms of wind and heavy rain. That should be pretty obvious, but you do need to pay attention to the forecast when you're getting ready to plant out, because heavy rains and wind will greatly reduce your success rate. Avoid exceptionally hot or cold temperatures. Pretty obvious there. The reason why I ended that window at December 1st is after December 1st we can get some pretty good cold spells, and the plants may not really do very well. I have to say, when I plant, I get 95% success. I don't get a whole lot of death. So some plants will die for various reasons other than your fault. Basically they may have problems. They may be in the pot too long. They may have twisted themselves around. But paying attention to a few things like this. Avoid very wet soil. The reason you want to do that is you actually ruin the soil has a composition, and if you start playing with it when it's wet, you lose that consistency. It'll turn to mush. So you want to avoid very wet soils. Although sometimes if you have clay, that's about all you can dig, is when it's really wet. Cool, cloudy weather over warm and sunny. That's pretty obvious. You want to look for a day when we have some fog, or there's a threat of rain. That'd be great. Morning or evening over midday, the same reason. You don't want to be planting at noon, exposing the plant's roots to sunlight. I like to kind of hide the plant from the sun and get it in the ground. The roots aren't meant to have sun at all. And this is my favorite thing, is to watch the forecast, and here comes a nice little rain, a little garden shower. Time to plant. Your plants know the difference between hose water and water from the sky. You're going to have to water them in right when you're planting them, but boy, do they appreciate water from the sky. They really do. It's just the right pH for them. It has all the right contents. They like it, assuming we get water. So water. How much do I water? That's always a very common question, and the answer, of course, is it depends. You have to know your soil type, sand, loam, or clay, or combinations thereof. If you're not sure, I think most people down here in the valley probably do have clay. A lot of what was here was removed to build houses. So a lot of times we have a stripped layer that's sort of not much of anything. But you can tell pretty easily by taking some moistened soil into your hand like this. And if it stays together like Play-Doh and never really comes apart, that's full-on clay. If it sort of is loose and kind of comes apart, a little snake is there, but kind of shake it apart, then you have a nice loam. That's great. And if it just laughs at you and falls apart, you have sand. few of us here do, but in Santa Cruz we do have sand. Know your average annual precipitation. This is really important when you're considering what plants I'm going to plant. You got to know what you get here. And I have this map. We're right in here. So we actually share. I kind of like looking where that is. This is orange. This is where San Jose is. Orange, maybe a little bit lighter. It's pretty much all south. So we have more of a southern affinity here in the valley. I live over here in Santa Cruz. I kind of live in the Pacific Northwest a little bit. I live in the northern part of the state. You know, here we are in dead-on Central California, so there's a split. So most of us here, if you live down around here, we have probably in the 10 to 15, maybe 15 to 20 if you live near the hills. So a desert is below 10. So we're not far from being a desert. And these are averages, by the way. This year, you live in a desert if you live down here. The South Valley here didn't even get desert precipitation. The deserts got better this year. So it makes sense that you'd want to know if you're about to plant something, where did it come from? And then you have to sort of match your needs to its needs to what you have. It's easier to add water than it is to subtract, mind you. So it's probably better to pick things from Southern California if you're down here in the valley. Southern California affinity. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about plants. Water frequently when first establishing, and like I said before, these plants frequently get maybe one or two waterings a day at a nursery. So consider that. If you're taking that plant and you're all of a sudden going to transfer it to your yard, baby it for a little bit. For that first week especially, let it sort of wean it off the water. It knows what to do. It'll find the water if you water correctly. And watering correctly means deep and infrequent watering. Deep, what I like to do is I have a hose that has a spray nozzle on it, and it actually leaks a little bit, so it drips. Kind of annoying, really, but except it's the perfect watering machine. I let that sit near my plant for 15, 20 minutes. What you're looking to do is get a plume of water going down, encourage those roots to go down. If you squirt the top for 30 seconds to a minute, guess where your roots are going to be? All at the top. And those roots will bake. So really what you're trying to do is get a plume of water going down so that the roots will follow it. They will. But if you're doing a surface water, there are some plants, and we'll talk about those as they come up, that don't mind a little spray off every once in a while, a little fog drip. But for the most part, especially when you're establishing plants, please water deeply. Use your water wisely, and that you can use my leaky hose, or you can actually just find one of those things and put your hose on really low and just let it sit there and go do something else, and then move it to the next plant. The best way. Less supplemental water will be needed even if it doesn't rain, from October to March, you don't need as much water because the plants aren't transpiring. They're not breathing as much. They're not getting baked, essentially. And be patient. An establishment period, especially when we're having a drought like this, can be over 2 years. And that doesn't mean you're watering every day. That doesn't mean, that means that eventually you're going to want to not water, probably. A lot of us, our goal is to do without watering. So in a couple of years, you can expect that will start to happen with most of your plants, if you're doing things right. Water. Actually, this picture is taken in my home state, Illinois. You wouldn't think, but there's a place in Illinois that was carved by glaciers, and this is all sandstone. And there's a couple dozen waterfalls like this there. So this is a sample watering schedule. It's not something you should be writing down because it's not going to be true for your house. It's not going to be true for your plants you're planting. But this is something you have to come up with when you're considering what you're going to be doing. I would say when you're first starting out, when the plants are coming from the watered nursery to your yard, keep on them, a couple times a week, and then you can start to wean them off. By that first, and if you're planting in October, pretty soon you're not going to have to water too much anymore because the rains come. If the rains don't come, then maybe once a week, give them a shower. give them a deep watering. But let's be optimistic. The rains come, and the plant is growing. I've actually established plants without any further watering other than that initial transition period when we are getting rain. I've established a lot of plants where that's it, it's done, and it's fine. So, yay for that. But probably, if the drought continues, you're going to need to water a couple times a month. Yeah, Sherry.
So Kevin, when you say 10 minutes, are you assuming from a hose?
We'll talk about methods of watering,
Okay.
but I'm assuming a deep, slow watering. So that's
Your drippy hose.
my drippy hose, or you can also, there's all sorts of irrigation you can install, and we'll talk a little bit about that here. But that's a good point. I mean, 10 minutes full on squirting it down? No, I'm talking about the slow, deep watering that I was recommending before. And how to water, thank you for the lead-in. By hand, I really like the fact that you can go and check plants and sort of say hi to them and see what their needs are, but some of us don't have that kind of time. So you may need to install an irrigation system. You may already have one if you have a lawn. Your house may have come with one. And usually those are spray, like big sprinklers that spray. That might be a little much for your new natives. You might still be wasting water. You could use it, but you can also convert it to a micro spray or drip system. And I really like these a lot. They're kind of fun to play with. So that's, micro spray is one of these. These are inexpensive systems that you can set up yourself, complete with timers and everything. But you still need to go and monitor those plants and make sure they're not getting too much, or make sure the dripper's not clogged. So it's not totally carefree. But I encourage you to look into these things. They're inexpensive. You can get them at Osh or different stores here. And setting up your own system is not difficult. You can also hire people. There's incredibly sophisticated systems that monitor the weather and put down rain when they need to. So those are pretty cool, but they're also kind of expensive. So the reason I like these micro sprays and the drip is that in a few years I've taken them out. By the time they kind of fall apart and get clogged and don't work anymore, you don't need them, so take them out. And I like that idea, is that I'm not constantly watering. So what about your soil? Well, hopefully it doesn't look like that, because that's not even soil at all, it's rocks. Most of us will have clay around here. But do you really have hard pan? There's a test, and it's kind of surprising to me. You dig a shovel hole 18 inches deep, and then you fill it with water. And most people are like, well, it's not draining. I can't watch it drain. I have bad drainage. 4 to 6 hours later, come back and look at it. If it's still there, yeah, you have bad drainage. But that 4 to 6 hours, a lot of people are waiting 15 minutes. And if it hasn't drained in 15 minutes, I have bad drainage. So give it a chance to drain. So that's a good check. There's good news about clay soil. It's very nutrient rich, and it holds water really well. So if you do have clay, and most of us do down here, that's what the valley gave us, it's kind of a blessing when it comes to water conservation. Now, a lot of the plants do like to have better drainage, so you might have to amend around the plant. But for the most part, clay is a good thing. So you need to know what the plant needs. Like I said, a lot of our drought-tolerant plants like decent drainage. They don't want to have water sitting on their roots the whole time. But you have to sort of know, and this information is more and more available on the internet. If you look and search a particular plant's name, it'll tell you what it needs. Mitigation techniques for plants. If you do have a nasty hard pan and it's really hard to deal with, you can plant the plants a little bit above grade. So that just means a few inches above grade, a little bit of a mound. And that will provide a little bit of drainage that it needs. You don't want to plant it on top of a hill necessarily, because that might be a little too much and it might be hard to get water to those roots. But a little bit of water off the crown of where the stem comes out is not a bad thing for many of our plants. Improve soils over time where practical, and that's just adding compost and mulch. And that's really a good way to improve a clay soil, is you're basically making soil, dig it in maybe a few inches and let that interact. whatever you do, my clay soil, I know what it needs sand. You've just made adobe. You've just made really, really good adobe, and it's not good. So don't add sand. You can add a little bit of sand, but you must add organic material, compost or something like that. I like to say import soils sparingly. I mean, I have worked on projects where we brought in truckloads, but I think that's a rare case. I think for the most part, you can get what you need from like cactus soil. I like the commercially available cactus soils, or almost any potting soil has decent drainage. So you don't have to amend your whole yard. You're planting only into a small area for each plant. So amend an area that plant is going to be happy with. This is a little bit of an advanced concept, but a lot of us these days live in areas that have been stripped of all natural goodness. The soil contains fungi that are extremely beneficial to plants. They set up a symbiotic relationship where the fungi attaches, the mycelium attaches to the roots of the plant, and they share resources. And one of the things that the fungus gives to the plant is ability to absorb water, many-fold better than it would have otherwise. So there are commercially available mycorrhizal inoculants. You might want to look into these. There is some evidence that they're working. I'm sort of on the border about it because I've had a lot of success without using it, and I think mycorrhizal relationships form anyway. So, but there are circumstances, especially if your yard's pretty tortured, maybe you know it's been scraped back in the past, consider adding some mycorrhizal inoculant. And finally, if you do have clay soil, like I said, dig in mulch material and improve the soil over time. You can also, I've used this to some success. Think about that clay as being terracotta and dig a big pot out. Essentially, it's hard to dig. It has to be wet. But if you plant into that terracotta pot that happens to be your soil, and you can fill it with nice soil, most plants will be okay with that. They'll live with that. Now, larger plants may get a little crowded in that area, but some things, smaller shrubs and smaller plants will be just fine if you can plant them into that little terracotta pot that is your soil. So we're going to talk a lot about witch plants because that's really, really important, like I said before, for success during the drought or success period. So how do plants do it? How do native plants do it? A lot of them have very extensive and deep root systems, especially the chaparral plants. They're amazing at finding moisture. They go everywhere for it. A lot of them have thick, hairy, or small, waxy leaves. They have leaves that are really adapted, and we'll look at some of those. Be drought deciduous, and that means summer comes, you drop your leaves and you go to sleep, just like it's the middle of winter back east. And that makes a lot of sense. That you think we have a lot of plants that do that. We have some, but we have a lot of herbaceous perennials that just come up and then die down. They're up for the spring as long as it's moist. When it comes to this time of year, they're not there anymore. And that's a little disconcerting for gardeners sometimes, but trust me, they usually come back. Live as an annual. This is a plant that lives one year. It grows up, makes seed, dies, and it summers out by having seeds in the ground. That's not a bad strategy if you're trying to live with this. And there's also plants that breathe at night, close up for the day. Most plants have their stomata, their pores, essentially their breathing mechanism open during the day so they can photosynthesize. But cacti and succulents have something that's called crassulation acid metabolism, CAM metabolism. And that's basically they close up during the day, they take in the air at night and then close up and do their work during the day. So that's kind of an interesting strategy if you're living in the desert, is close up your stomata during the day and still be able to photosynthesize through this chemical process. So witch plants. Now that's a beautiful plant, but if you're going to plant a lot of those, this thing likes to be right next to the creek. I actually have it at my place because I live next to a creek. This is leopard lily, and it's a beautiful plant. As thirsty as it is, it still would be better than a lawn to have a whole bunch of these in your front yard. Because around this time of year, they go dormant, and you don't water them anymore, and they go away. They're bulbs. They're all herbaceous perennials. So you have a wonderful display for around 4th of July, and then they die down and you have nothing. Hey, maybe that's what that scorched earth yard was all about. I doubt it. So this plant is Venus thistle, and it has, you can see what its adaptation is. It has really hairy leaves, very reflective. Most of us don't think about planting thistles, but this one is a showstopper. It really is gorgeous. That silvery foliage, and the whole plant is covered with it, with this beautiful red flower. Really something.
Sample name?
That is Cirsium occidentale venustum. I'm kind of leaving those out, but if anybody wants to know, just let me know. This one, Mattia elegans, yes, the elegant Mattia. This is an annual plant, so it lives only 1 year. It blooms around this time of year, though. That's a tough plant. No rain at all, and it blooms this time of year. And it's got an interesting, we'll see some pictures of it later. It closes up during the day to conserve energy. And it's open like this in the morning. I love having this plant in my yard. It's absolutely gorgeous. The California lilacs, ceanothus plants, they're really, really cool. Everybody needs a ceanothus. That's what I think. They have these tough little leaves, very drought tough. They can take it. In fact, they can be killed by too much water. And then here's a succulent, the Pacific stonecrop, Sedum staphylopholium, and it does that breathing at night, that thing where it breathes at night and does its thing during the day with a chemical process. Got a desert mallow in the background here. I mean, these things do well with 5 inches of rain every year. That's amazing to me. This is a perennial plant that does so well with that little. So when you're choosing plants, you really need to know your ecological address. You need to know where you live. Most of us down here lived in an oak savanna at one time. That's what it was. Now it's a home savanna, essentially. You can find out what would have grown there. There's a couple different sites, whatgrowshere.org. That's through CalFlora. And also mynativeplants.com. That's through a really cool nursery down in Central California, Southern California, I guess, Central Coast, called Las Politas. And if you enter you enter your zip code and a bunch of parameters, and it'll get you a list of plants that'll work in your yard. It's kind of cool.
Which nursery go to get how much it costs?
Well, you don't have to use their nursery. Bert Johnson just passed away, but he was very generous in giving us lots of information. So you can actually mail order their plants too, but you can find these plants elsewhere. And this is a good question. Do you want to use supplemental water? Some people don't mind using a little bit. It's still going to be way less than a lawn, and way less than some of the European plants that require water just about every day. But I think a lot of us are saying, no, I don't want to use supplemental water. You're going to need it when you're establishing the plants, but I'm talking about after that establishment period, do you want to use water or not? And I think a lot of us are saying no, and I'm applauding that. Where I live, I have to admit, I use water, but I live right next to the creek, water's right there, I use water. But I guess that's my guilty pleasure where I live. When I come over here and work, there's no water that I would like to use because we need it all.
Steve has a question.
Yes, Steve?
Well, it's sort of a comment. So, I've started capturing warm-up water from my shower.
Oh, yeah?
So I just dump it in an area, and hey, that's my riparian area, so I've got a leopard lily.
Well, there you go.
I don't
You
use
don't have to
any
feel
extra
guilty about
water,
it. Yeah.
but, you get to have plants from a much wider area, and it's nice.
I'm for it. That's a good plan. You can have plants that you wouldn't normally be able to have if you're willing to go through that little extra effort.
Yeah.
It's a little extra effort, but not bad. I thought you were going to talk about capturing rain from the gutters too. That's a great way to.
I do that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, these are things I'm not touching on today, but these are really good things to consider. You can capture the water we do get into rain barrels it's not terribly expensive to do that. You can set it up yourself, but there's also pretty easily set up pre-made systems for that. And there's also gray water. I mean, a lot of us don't live in places where we're allowed to have gray water, but if you're allowed to have gray water, you can use water from, well, like Steve is saying, but you can actually get it plumbed, yeah.
And, you know, another thing is, you don't really have to go through the effort to do a barrel for the runoff. Think about where your gutters are, and you can plant something, and as long as you've got good soil, it's gonna absorb a lot of that water. So Kevin suggested some plants that were, you know, just really wonderful. They like a little extra water. I planted them by the gutter with the downspout, and the ones by the downspout do much better.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, it's not hard. I mean, that's just thinking a little bit ahead.
And the other thing you can do is if you create sort of a false river bed.
Yeah.
And then the water that comes off of your roof runs
little
down
dry
the
creek,
riverbed, and
yeah.
guess what you get to plant by the riverbed?
Well, and that's being a desert. You know, the desert has desert washes, well, you make your
Yeah.
own desert wash essentially with the downspout. It's a good thought. Another thing to consider when you're choosing which plants is how much sun do you have, and that's more than just, oh, well, I face south. A lot of us live in urban canyons where our neighbor's house may be providing shade. The front yard has a tree that's providing shade. So you really need to think about these things, and you need to think about them not just right now. Right now, it's our sun's great, but how's your sun in the winter? So, and there are tools for that these days as well, like Google Earth, that'll show you what the sun angle and what the shadows would look like at different times of year. So you do have to consider how much sun you have and what your aspect is. So there's a lot of choices from chaparral, from the desert, from the coastal strand, which doesn't seem right, but a lot of the coastal plants are very tough. They grow in that, you know, they grow in sand, and they're extremely tough when it comes to water usage. Coastal sage scrub, and of course oak woodlands is where a lot of what would have been here is oak woodlands. Very drought tolerant, and they grow well in our area, and they look great. I was touching on this earlier. You know, it's important to figure out, do you have if you live down here, you kind of live in Southern California, to be honest. I mean, I don't want to put you down there necessarily, but ecological address-wise, you're closer to being in the LA basin than you are to being where I live. I live in the Pacific Northwest, is the way I feel. So do you have a northern or southern affinity where you live? It's important to know that. If you live in the hills around here, you may be getting a little bit northern. But I'm suggesting that most of us down here should probably be looking towards the south for our plant palette, instead of using things that come from a place that gets 200 inches of rain a year in the northwest part of the state. So here we're going to go through some plants, and these are, I chose these. It's really hard because there's thousands and thousands of plants in California that'll work well here. So I'm going with the ones that I think will work pretty good, pretty easily around here. This one is blue elderberry. Puts on a nice show of flowers. It's still flowering over in Santa Cruz. I'm kind of floored. I don't know how it's doing it, but it makes nice fruit too. It's edible. Birds like it. People like it. It's fairly tasty. Elderberry wine. It does. Actually, that's one of them you can use. There's also a red elderberry. Don't make anything out of that. It's toxic. It's also much less drought tolerant. This plant will grow up pretty quickly. If you have the right circumstances, it's a shrub that almost is a tree. So you have to consider yourself, do I really have room for a shrub that almost is a tree? Yeah. I'm sorry, it's Sambucus nigra now, subspecies canadensis. Used to be Sambucus mexicana. A lot of people don't know this one from this look. This is our state shrub, Toyin. That's the look people know. It's in the rose family, so that's a little tiny rose flower. Each one of those flowers it has is a rose. It's flowering right now in many places around the valley. And this is the plant, this is one of the plants anyway, that reportedly gave Hollywood its name, because it has sort of a hollyish appearance. And if you're a bird and these are ripe, paradise. And this plant will, so it's a pretty good sized shrub, maybe small tree. And I've seen them spread, because the birds like them so much, the birds will give you one over here too. So that's kind of a nice thing to have.
What's it called?
That's Toyan. Heteromeles arbudifolia, our state shrub, Toyan. Oh, I can see it's cut off now. Manzanitas. Manzanitas are wonderful plants. They're very Californian. They are sort of a California, they could have been our state shrub too, I think, because just about every county has them. Sun-loving plants, they thrive on lack of rain. They live in tortuous locations, so they really do well. There's a few that are very garden tolerant. One's called Howard McMinn. That's what you're seeing here. And it accepts some water. Most of them are a little bit allergic to water at the wrong times, especially. They don't like water during the summer. This one seems to be able to take it pretty well.
Is this manzanita?
This is manzanita, yeah. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of manzanitas with different kinds of flowers. They usually have pretty tough leaves. The leaves will actually move with the sun so that they are oblique. They don't catch the sun full. They will move throughout the day so that they barely get the sun. That's kind of a nice strategy. Look at the tortuous location this thing's growing on. This is up near Lockheed in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This is just tortuous Monterey shale, and these things thrive there. This is a rare one that you won't have in your garden, but it's still pretty neat. And the name means little apple, manzanita. And great plants. They bloom in the winter. If you have one, you'll start having hummingbird wars, because Anna's hummingbird loves these at the time of year, and they'll be fighting over that bush. They'll be fighting over a whole stand of bushes. I don't understand. There's enough for everybody, but anyway, that's for them to take up. There's one right there, and they do love it. It's got the beautiful red bark. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about the manzanita. How much space does that require?
Well, there's manzanitas that are as big as my laptop, and there's manzanitas that are, well, they would get up to the
I've seen the
ceiling.
big ones. I just didn't know if there were any,
Yeah, there's actually ground cover ones. The ground cover ones tend to need a little bit more water, so you got to be careful of those. That one I planted way back when, 21 years ago, was one of those that needs water. So I didn't know that at the time. I was just thinking manzanitas, they're drought tolerant. Come on. Don't plant manzanitas in spring. This is one plant that if you plant it in spring, I don't think you're going to have success. That's been my experience, and a lot of people I know. Because you're going to have to be watering when it's warm, and they don't like water when it's warm.
You do it in the fall.
Do it in the fall. You'll have much better success. Even if it doesn't rain, you'll have better success planting your manzanita in the fall. And plants like manzanitas and a few things that don't like water during the summer, look for a day when we have the fog rolled in and give it a little fog drip. They don't mind that. That kind of spruces them up, and you're getting away with some water when it's not too terribly hot. Some plants, and we'll probably get to those in a little bit, some plants don't mind a thunderstorm. If they come from the Sierra or even Southern California, they have thunderstorms almost every year, and they don't mind a little bit of water. There's a hummingbird eye view of manzanita. So that nice blue shrub there is our California lilac, and there's so many different ones. Ceanothus papillosus is this one, warty leaf. You can see where it gets the name. This one actually is lent its genes. The Ceanothus genus is notorious for its mixing. They get along real well, so you get a lot of different hybrids. And one of the plants that's loaned its genes is this one, papillosus. And so you'll see a lot of them that have this sort of bumpy, small leaf. Wonderful smell. The bloom is in spring, but the plant continues. This is another one. A lot of references will say this plant is short-lived in gardens. That's because people water the heck out of it. And it's short, it'll only live a few years if you water the heck out of it. I've had one live maybe 15 years now, and it's on a natural cycle. I don't water it. And I think that's what I've read and what I've heard from others. Again, you have ground cover. Well, we'll see. There's some ground cover ones, and there's also ones that will be as tall as this building. So that's kind of a stretch, but about as tall as this room anyway. Small trees. So you have to make sure you pick the right ones, and the tag will tell you approximately the size. This plant has made it. When it comes, it's all the way into England. This is one of those plants that the English relish. In their climate, it probably doesn't last too terribly long. But this one, this is a picture taken in the South Valley here. It's a small tree. This one's called Ray Hartman, Ceanothus Ray Hartman. And it's a small tree with these lovely, huge blossoms on it. And imagine the buzzing that goes on here. You have a question?
That first line of the CNPS, is that in the drum?
That was Madrone before it, yeah. That's pretty neat. That's at Bonnie Doon in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Lots of different flavors there's a Ceanothus for every situation, so everybody can have one. Unless you're in the deepest of shade. I don't think anybody here really is, but they're a little bit challenging at my place. I have one sunny spot, that's what I use. And there's ground cover ones too. So there's ones that grow right on the ground. They tend to need a little bit more water, but not as much as the ground cover manzanitas.
Are they very tough?
They're very tough, yeah. I've seen yards where you can kind of walk through them, and it doesn't hurt them. I wouldn't say you can have a lawn of Ceanothus, but you can have them and be able to step near them. They're wonderful butterfly plants, obviously. That's a checker spot butterfly. So on 280, if you drive up and down 280 on the peninsula, you'll see lots and lots of Ceanothus bloom in March. It's kind of this kind of Ceanothus. With it, they've planted a lot of these, and that's redbud. And they put on quite a show together. So that's an easy landscape right there. Have a couple of those plants. This is a very drought tolerant shrub. It has wonderful flowers in the spring, and then the leaves come out, these big heart-shaped leaves. The pods sort of dangle as ornaments throughout the summer, and then it gives you color in the fall. So that's a pretty cool plant, and not too terribly difficult to grow. Fremontodendron. There's large ones like this one. They've been described as the size of a garage, and I would agree with that. So a lot of suburban homes don't really have room for this, but there are smaller ones as well. This is another plant that's kind of notorious for no summer water. It doesn't like summer water. I've noticed it kind of likes to be near water. My most successful ones have been near my vegetable garden that I, of course, have to water all throughout the year. It's not getting direct water, but it must be getting some. It's looking glorious. Really nice blooms. Lots of insect activity.
You have the name up there?
Flannel bush, it's up on top. Fremontodendron. Some people are a little bit allergic to it, so just keep that in mind as far as getting it on you. It can be a little itchy, but worth it. And there are ones that are a little bit smaller. They're probably not the best beginner plants, though. They are a little bit hard to establish sometimes. The garage size ones are pretty good. Those are easy. Yeah.
I got a Fremontodendron decumbens from
Yeah.
our plant sale.
Yeah.
And,
I have one of
had
those
for
too, and
about
it's-
6 or 7 years. Mine's about like this.
That low, huh? Yeah.
And, it's about 6 foot wide now. And it's a beautiful plant, it's got these wonderful flowers.
Yeah. Is yours orange?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine too. Probably the same one. So this plant grows right here in the hills, Santa Teresa. This is holly leaf cherry. My names got cut off. I'm sorry for that. They're fine on my computer. This is holly leaf cherry, and this is an actual cherry, and it's evergreen. Most cherries lose their leaves every year. This one's evergreen. Really neat. And very tough leaves. You'll see this is one of those buzzing bushes when it's in bloom that you just hear a buzz and you don't even necessarily see the bees. They're all there though. And it's right in Santa Teresa Park, very easy to grow. It'll actually take some supplemental water if you want to get it to grow up pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's kind of slow growing, but worth it, definitely worth it. And the question I always get is, are the fruits edible? Yes, they are. We don't really want to eat them because the pit is it's very little fruit. The pit is huge and the skin is there, but there's very little fruit. The birds go crazy over them. So it's a good bird plant. But they're not, I wouldn't say they're going to replace commercial cherries for you. But you can see that, this is one of those plants that's got the tough leaves that kind of have a waxy coating on it. So it tells you it's probably pretty drought tolerant. Buckeye, this picture was taken actually in Guadalupe Oak Grove Park, which is a City of San Jose park at Coleman and Almaden Expressway. It's a neat place. And this California Buckeye, this is an old one. This is a legacy one, I would say. This is the plant that's kind of notorious for doing, it's got beautiful flowers. It's very fragrant. This is a May, early June flower. Really, really beautiful. All sorts of butterflies will be on it. It's not, the bees leave it alone because it's actually toxic to bees, but the butterflies like
Only
it.
European.
Pardon?
Only to
Only the, that's right, yeah, only to the European honeybee. It makes sense that our bees would be fine with it, right? It's notorious for its summer deciduousness. So it loses its leaves in summer, but it leaves these ornaments, the seeds. They're huge. And I love it. It's got great art. You got a plant with that kind of architecture. Now, you're probably not going to get that one in 10 years even, but eventually you'll get it. And they grow fairly quickly, actually. My experience has been they put on some growth pretty quickly, especially if you start them from seed. But I really like the ornaments that it leaves.
So is that Buckeye in Lisbon edible?
Not the, well,
No.
I think it was emergency food.
Yes.
I think it's edible if you process it properly. It's bitter, it's got alkaloids in it that are toxic, but it's one of those things, I think probably native peoples used it if everything else failed type of thing. It's huge. It's just bigger than a golf ball, almost a baseball size. Pardon? Leach. Yeah, I think for like acorns, but more so. So I think it was not a preferred food, but it is edible if you know what to do. Monkey flower. Our monkey flowers are very easy to grow. They're actually, they live, so this one's a shot in the chaparral community, but they also live in the oak woodlands. They live in the coastal sage scrub. That tells you when a plant can live in a couple different circumstances, it's probably pretty tough. And this one definitely is. Throughout the state, they vary in color. So we got red down in Southern California, and they're more orange up here. And where the two meet, you get some hybridization. And when people have put them together, you get some major hybridization.
So they're pretty low to the ground?
They're pretty low to the ground. I would say, they might get this high. A lot of the hybrids tend to stay low. Well, you got one that high.
No.
It's true. Is it getting extra water or something? Or is that one of your downspout plants?
Not that much.
No?
Actually, it's, no.
So
It's not that big around, but it's,
this one should go dormant this time of year. You can water it so that it doesn't, but my experience is that it will probably die in a few years. So I don't know, are you concerned, is yours still going, or is it?
it's not looking its best,
Well, that's what it should, I mean, that's part of the cycle of California. It really should be looking its best right now, but it's alive.
Yeah.
That's what's important. But they do flower for a long time, actually.
I'm sorry, Kevin,
Yeah.
which one is that?
I'm not sure exactly which hybrid this is.
Oh, okay.
I don't recall, and my photos weren't labeled. Maybe Valentine? That might be. This one I know, it's changeling. This is my favorite one. I have this one, and I've spread it all around. I got this from Yerba Buena. They don't have it anymore. Yerba Buena Garden, Yerba Buena Nursery. It's really easy to grow. I keep taking cuttings and just sticking them in the ground during the wet season, and then I have another plant. So I really like this one a lot. And it's going dormant at my place too, even though it's a moist area, it's going dormant now. So what do I put on the dry, south-facing part of my house? I would say, I always tell people salvias, sages. And you could do a whole program on sages. This one's purple sage. They are tough. When I want to put on a show, when a client is eager to get their garden going, we're planting salvias. Because they will get going pretty quickly and put on a show the next summer after you plant. Yeah?
Are all the sages edible as an herb?
No, I don't think so. I would think there's probably some that maybe have some toxins to them. There's a lot of different salvias. So there's probably some that are toxic. There's a couple, the Cleveland sage that we have here. is edible and quite good. It competes right there with the Salvia officinalis, the culinary sage. So it's a good one. It's a little stronger maybe, but it definitely is edible. Winterford Gilman, there's some great sages. This is our local one, probably not the showiest of them. This is black sage, but it grows right in the hills around here. And if you go and walk in the hills around here right now, you'll know why they call it black sage, because it's it really does not look good now. It looks, for all intents and purposes, to be dead, but it comes right back as soon as the first rains come. And if you walk in Santa Teresa Park where these are during the bloom, it's a bee highway. It really is. It's an absolute bee highway. Here it is a little closer up. White sage was the ceremonial sage of the Native Americans. It's the one they use for, they call smudge, that purifies the air. It's really a nice plant. This is a creeping sage, or Sonoma sage. So I could go on and on about sages, but this is a buckwheat. I really like buckwheats a lot, and buckwheats are the star of the show right now. This is Areogonum species. This one's, I think this is arborescens, the island one. Rosy buckwheat. This one's lovely, and I have people complain that it spreads too much. It just spreads and spreads and spreads. Oh, that's terrible. Sorry. But it does tend to reseed.
It looks low to ground too.
Most of the buckwheats are about this tall. There's one that's my size called Areogonum giganteum, St. Catherine's lace, and it doesn't do as well in the heat.
So the ones that are lower to the ground like that, do they attract some things like that?
No,
Like
they-
to live low?
They attract butterflies and bees more than anything else. They're a really good plant for that. I suppose, eating seeds, I would think it'd attract more birds for the seeds than anything. But if you have a rodent issue already, they would probably take advantage of the fact that those seeds are there.
How many colors does it come in?
Dozens, I would say, in different shades. There's a lot of pinks, there's whites, there's yellows, sulfur buckwheats. So there's a flavor of buckwheat for almost any situation. Yeah,
On the rosy buckwheat, what kind of water do you want?
not a whole lot. I mean,
What can it take?
it'll probably get moss and mold type of thing. It'll might get a little bit of powdery mildew sort of situation if it gets too much water. But it's pretty garden friendly. I think that's part of the reason it spreads so well. Another shot from Guadalupe Oak Grove Park. This is our hillside gooseberry. And it's a little more subtle, but this is a February shot. And the plant is in full bloom in February. Its friend right here is chaparral currant, and it starts blooming in November around here. So you gotta like a plant that does that. Pink flowering currant. For your shadiest areas around here, it'll do okay, but it's probably better where I live, to be honest. It's a beautiful plant though, and I love the smell of it. The fragrance of the leaves is just beautiful after the rain.
What was the name of the plant?
Pink flowering currant.
Is that a shrub or is that something?
This is a shrub. Yeah, this is a shrub that's probably about my height or so, 6 feet or so.
It likes the shade a little bit.
It likes the shade, definitely.
How tall?
About 6 feet, and it prefers shade, especially around here. Fuchsia flowering gooseberry. This one is a Southern California plant that makes it up to here just barely. It's by Anderson Dam, and that's its northern extent. It is a showstopper when it's in full bloom. And you can imagine who this is built for. That's a hummingbird plant for sure.
So you said fuchsia flowering, oh, they're gooseberries.
Fuchsia flowering gooseberry. Gooseberries have thorns, so that's one of the downsides. The currants don't have thorns. So the gooseberries do. So this is one to have, we don't want to have this too close to a walkway, for example, because it's kind of pokey.
How tall?
This one can get pretty tall. In our area, probably around 6 feet or so, but I've seen it in Southern California, a huge shrub, 10 feet tall. I like to have these more in the background, again,
Are the thorns really painful?
They're pretty good.
So they're good for under windows?
Yeah, I would say so. They're good for as a barrier because they're pretty sharp.
But I have holly in Dallas, and it worked real well for that. You couldn't get through it. You couldn't get through it, so.
It makes it great to clean them.
This is this one doesn't carry a common name currant or gooseberry. It's perfume. This is actually from the Channel Islands. It's called Catalina perfume. And it smells wonderful, especially, it's a great dry shade plant. It's been described as a high ground cover because it sort of gets about this high. It arches over and starts another plant. So it sends out these canes that sort of arch out. It does real well in dry shade in our area. In dry shade means you still have to establish it. But once it's established, you shouldn't have to water this plant.
So if they're attracting birds in there, they're most household pets,
Oh yeah, they're fine.
do they create currents? Does golden current, does that current area?
They do, but so I'll show you one in a second. The golden currant takes maybe a little bit of water, but not a whole lot. It grows in drainages in Southern California, so that's not a whole lot of water, right? I mean, we don't get that much there. But I've seen it doing really well in the Santa Monica Mountains. And yes, currants, edible, more so for birds.
I like them.
Oh, do you?
I
Okay.
eat them all the time.
Well, they're if you get them right, they're pretty tasty.
They are.
This is probably the most tasty of any of the ribes. I have the pink flowering currant, and it's not that good. I leave them for the birds.
It's like, they're big, huh? They grow big.
This one can go up to 10 feet tall. So this one's pretty big.
So which one's hard to harvest?
This is the golden currant.
Oh,
Yeah.
Today on hike, I saw one that was, in the shade, in a drainage, and it was really, had a lot of fruit about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch in diameter, golden yellow, and totally covered with, little, sort of sharp hairs.
That sounds like a gooseberry. Yeah.
And do you know what kind that was?
I have to see it. It's hard to say. There's a couple different ones that could be here. So I'm just now getting, those are all shrubs. I'm getting the perennials. We're gonna go pretty quickly because we're running out of time here. Columbine is something that'll, you don't normally, this is a northwestern plant, but you can get away with it here in shade because it's a perennial, it's an herbaceous perennial. Right now, they're underground. They're not doing anything, they're done. So they can summer out by being underground. Come up in the spring and, around April or so, you get some gorgeous flowers and attractive to many different wildlife species. One of my favorite sages is a shade and part shade specialist. Actually, I put it in all situations where I live. This is hummingbird sage. And yeah, it attracts hummingbirds. This one can get a little out of control, but what a pleasure to pull this because it smells really good. It smells just wonderful. And there was a point where I had so much of this, I was sharing this with anybody who wanted it. I've sort of depleted my supply, so I'm not doing that right now. Another herbaceous perennial that you can consider is hound's tongue. This you can get this at CNPS plant sale. I don't know if we'll have them this year, but we have had them in the past, and I'm cultivating some to sell at the Santa Clara Valley's native plant sale. So that's twice a year.
Can you go back a slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hound's tongue, and this one again is you don't have to worry about it because right now it's underground. This is a plant that has a storage root that could be huge.
Do you grow those with seed cover?
I grew them from seed. Yeah, you can also cut.
The seeds need special treatment.
The special treatment is that there's no special treatment. They grow right away, but you have to be careful about watering that first year. If you water them too much, they die. If you don't water them enough, they die. So there's a sweet spot when you're cultivating them. But they're pretty easy to divide once you have them. You can divide that big old root and put some over here. So it's not a hard plant. It just takes a little bit of patience to get to a flower. And I forgot to turn off my phone. Irises. We have lots and lots of nice irises here. We have 3 different species in our area, but you can also get some that are called the PCH hybrids that grow really well. Around here, you'd want to put them some part shade to shade. When people ask me what to grow underneath my oaks, iris is a good option. And there are some really gorgeous ones. All sorts of flavors. Checker bloom is an easy herbaceous perennial that'll come up in the spring. It looks like it's wild hollyhock is one of its common names. And it's, again, pretty easy to grow, but you have to get used to it going away this time of year and then coming back and having that faith that it will. California fuchsia. Boy, there's a whole program coming up on California fuchsias, and there's a reason why. They're glorious. They are the stars of the show, starting a month or two ago, all through October, and they come in many different flavors. Some of them have the sort of whitish hairs on the leaves. Some of them, have orange flowers. They're gorgeous, and they're awesome hummingbird plants. Hummingbirds need the food this time of year. It's sparse out there.
It's easy to find.
Pretty easy to find. Yeah, they're pretty common. We don't want to forget the ferns, because there's some decent ferns. And these are herbaceous as well. Maidenhair fern grows right here in Santa Teresa County Park. And they don't take much water outside the rainy season. In the rainy season, if it's not raining, squirt them down. They're fine. They don't need a whole lot of water. They don't have roots that go really deep. They actually have more surface roots. Coffee fern and goldback fern. Some of these are hard to find. This is polypody. It's there until the rain stops, and then it's gone. Wood fern. Sword fern, which is actually, grows in moisture situations, but it does pretty well in the valley here with minimal water. This is one you can mist occasionally, and it does just fine. I'm amazed how drought tolerant this thing is too. I'm watching my hillside, it had 1,000 of them up there. A lot of them looked like they were about to die, but they came back really fresh. California has bulbs that the rest of the world envies. This is Harvest Rodea, our Mariposa lilies. They really aren't too hard to grow unless you're outside of California. They're pretty easy for us to grow. This is a globe lily, another type of calicornis. I grow these, and I have lots, so I'm going to be selling these too, because I keep dividing them. Yeah.
Give us some of those.
So this, yeah. Well, come to the plant sale. We'll definitely be having some. This bucket I put maybe 10 in a couple years ago, and I dumped it out, and I got all of those right there. They divide very quickly. They're very easy to care for. Basically, protect from predation. You don't want things to eat them up. Keep dry in the summer. That's the cardinal rule. If they will rot out with water in the summer. And divide them in autumn. Otherwise, they start to get a little crowded. I like having them in containers. You can just pop them in the ground, pop them back out. You can kind of hide the container underground, and then makes them easier to manage. You can also put them in the ground, and if the gophers have them, well, then so be it, because they keep dividing. That's actually how they grow in nature. Things like blue dicks and ethereal spear, they thrive on that disturbance caused by gophers that are eating the bulbs. It's kind of a symbiosis almost. Oceans of annuals. In California, a large part of our flora is annuals. You can take advantage of these in your garden. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Lupin. Oh, I wanted to show you the owl. This is called owl's clover. It's not a clover. There's the owl. In case you've never seen the owl before on owl's clover. This is red ribbons clarkia. Grows really well in our area in part shade. This is a coyote ridge, about 5 to 6 miles from here. Can you believe it? This exists. And this is all annuals. This is down at Carrizo Plain in a good year. This is 2010, our last good year at Carrizo Plain. It's gorgeous. This is a little closer to home though. This is a Style Ranch, Santa Teresa County Park, with lots and lots of poppies. Poppies and also our other native sage. This is a chia. And it was a very important plant to Native Americans here, and it still is a very important plant to Native South Americans. And you can actually go to the store and buy the South American version as a health food. But they're extremely easy to grow, and they thrive on dry. They have to have water to germinate, but these cover the deserts in a year when they get 5 inches of rain. This is red mates, another plant that grows really well around here. These are all plants that show up in the spring and then they're gone. Lupins, this particular gully lupin, it grows around a lot of our reservoirs. This is taken at Lexington Reservoir in a good year. It's not hard to grow, just need to protect these from slugs. This is that one I was talking to you about before, the elegant Nadia. This is in my yard. This is that plant that closes up as the day goes on. It's blooming now, and it starts to close up as the day goes, as the morning goes on. But I love waking up to that. Chinese houses are shade, annual, shade to part shade.
Sorry, what were those ones?
Chinese houses, because they look kind of like pagodas. This is a 5-spot. This is a nice, beautiful little plant that grows in the Sierra foothills, but is not too hard to grow around here. This is blazing star country. Blazing star grows in the hills above here, and I know several people that can grow it. I can't grow where I live. I think it's just too moist and too cool. But you guys live in hot, dry, and that's what this plant likes. It likes it a lot. That's blazing star, Maxilla lindleyi. So a few things about planting seeds. The best thing to do is prepare the area the spring before. You want to. The hardest thing about annuals is that they have to compete with the weeds. And the weeds are weeds for a reason. They are very successful plants. So you're going to have to be battling weeds. If you don't prepare it real well and clear the area, you're going to have to learn what your seedlings look like. The best outcome comes from sowing in the autumn, and especially when it comes to a drought. If you sow seeds in the autumn, you have a good shot of getting some wildflowers. Disturb the soil, so you sort of rake the soil when you want to plant it. Mix the seed with fine sand. Scatter, shake, and then step it in. And I'm literally talking about stepping on the seeds. Because what they really want is good seed-soil contact. And I've seen car tracks where the seeds came up in the car tracks and nowhere else because there was good seed-soil contact. So step them in. Don't worry, they're still seeds, they're fine. Now when they start growing, don't step on them. And you'll need to protect your seeds from birds, especially after August 15th, because the white-crowned sparrows come and you're feeding them as expensive bird food if you spread seeds out.
But you meant
October, I'm sorry. October 15th, the transient white-crowned sparrows come and they really go for your garden. This is my favorite method. I hear the forecast of that first big storm, assuming that we're going to have one. We usually do, even in drought years. I'm out there in the hour or two before, because the rain will just beat those seeds into the ground and the birds don't have a chance. So I really like that method. Just really quickly, a few planting tips to get the plants in the ground. Have everything ready. Water the ground and the plant. Dig a hole twice as wide and deep as the container, roughly, if you can. This is a little ceanothus, California lilac that I planted, and it's now about my height. It's 2 years old. Once in the ground, you want to build a little catchment basin, a little area of drainage around it, so that the water doesn't run off or have a chance to sit there and get into the root area. Water it in, and give it a good soaking that first time. Remember, it just came from the nursery, so it needs to be babied a little bit. And then compost. It's really important to retain moisture in your soil by spreading this compost around. Keep it away from the trunk, for lack of a better term, the stem. You want to keep it away about 4 to 6 inches. You don't want that stuff touching the plant, but this is a really big secret to keeping your water usage down, because it's amazing the difference between 2 to 4 inches of mulch is great. And bare soil dries out so quickly, you dig underneath the mulch and it's still moist. And that's basically what it looks like. There's a blade of grass right up there, so this is pretty fine grained. You can also use wood chippings from arborists. A lot of times these are free. They just say, you can contact your local arborist and have them dumped. There are some concerns about type of plant that they've chopped up and giving to you. And some of those concerns may be valid, so I kind of like to know what's in it. I actually have a friend who's an arborist, so I get a chance to use that. But it's pretty effective. The plants sort of grow over it and into it over time. The best is to deciduous oak leaves. So like valley oak, that's the best. That stuff is so good. But you can't really buy it. You have to sort of find it. A lot of people will be throwing this away. They sweep up their leaves and put them on the street. You can go, oh boy, there's the best mulch ever. And even other plants can be mulch. That's a green mulch. These are salvias that really shouldn't be getting along, but they are. That's why I included this picture, because it's weird. So to wrap up, this is a picture of a columbine that I have called summer columbine that's blooming right now. And again, I'm spending some water to get it. It's a beautiful plant. Just to wrap up, the formula really is good plant choices, timing your install to the right time, and I'm saying it's got to be fall if you're doing it during drought. Prepare the soil properly, and there's a lot of different things you can do there. Watering skill. I think that's the big thing that it comes down to when it comes to natives, is people learning how to water. And again, deep and infrequent waterings are going to encourage your plants to be drought tolerant. And then conserving soil moisture by mulching. That's great. You can even like house compost that you make, great. But you can also buy compost. You'll be using a lot less water. You'll have beautiful surroundings, and you'll be learning to live with California's natural rhythm, which sometimes there's a plant blooming all the time in California, and you can have it in your yard. But there's a lot of things that, this is sort of the rest time for plants. But even still, there's things like buckwheat that are going off right now. California fuchsia that can be going off right now. So there's always a time for something. And some resources here. Gardening with Natives, of course, and I want to thank Sherry and Gardening with Natives for all the great programs that they put together. It's amazing the amount of information that's out there, and now it's out there on the web too, thanks to Steve.
Well,
I mentioned Las Colitas Nursery. Check them out. That's a cool website for learning about what plants might work. CalFlora tells you what grows around in your zip code. Love these books. These two are made by one group of authors. This is a menu, pretty much, of wonderful plants to use. This is Reimagining the California Lawn. It includes some non-natives as well, but it's a very good, well-written book. And then I love Judith Larner Lowry, who runs Larner Seeds. You can buy seeds from her company, but she writes wonderfully. And there's some really good stories and a lot of good information about how to grow things in here. So she's a really good writer, but there's also lots of nice info. That's all I have. Thank you very much.